was a fantastic piece, Andy. Just bringing all those issues together for us. I think you would have enjoyed Danny Dorling's presentation this morning. I think you're offering some of the answers to the problems he was sharing about housing being a human right, and as you said, edging us towards perhaps the universal basic income or that kind of approach. As chair's privilege, a particular question. I mean, I really liked your optimism, but we saw the minister this morning. How optimistic are you really about what's going to happen next? Because Danny Dorling's numbers about the numbers of families, for example, living in the private rented sector without enough money to pay the rent, the numbers of families on the edge of drifting into homelessness, must be a deep concern. And perhaps a second question, as the mayor of Greater Manchester, as a regional leader, what would you like the government to do for the city region to help you? I mean, it sounds like to me they could help quite a bit by kind of putting some money in and getting out of the way for you to organise and to lead. But is there anything else missing? Thinking about the health system, perhaps?
Oh my God, there's so much. There's so much missing. It's like where do I start? But just to sort of agree with you, I do worry a lot about what's coming after the pandemic. Definitely, I think there's a mental health crisis that's been happening, largely hidden, well, not completely hidden, but I think there's a pandemic of mental illness. I think going to come through more and more. And yeah, I worry greatly about what's around the corner. But I suppose you do have to hold on to the positives. We know what works. If you want to stop homelessness, if that's a genuine government commitment, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here, because I think they have done some good things as a government on homelessness. They more recently, I think it's fair to say, have seemed to understand more the importance of the issue. I think the minister, although I don't know him, I understand he has some background in the issue, which is encouraging. So I think we know what will work, basically. We've got 3 pilots of Housing First in Liverpool, West Mids and Manchester that show it works. They're all recording similar rates of success when you have a high fidelity model to the principles of Housing First. So it's a question of will, isn't it? It's a question of will. And I, this is something I've been musing about with the nurses' pay situation over the last few days. For a long time, ministers have got on the telly, and this was true in the government I was in, saying, "Oh, it's not affordable. It's not affordable." But I think things have changed in the last year as to what is affordable and what isn't affordable. Lots of things are suddenly affordable, aren't they? And it depends, whether you think tackling homelessness is, it's affordable. If you choose to do it as a priority, it's definitely affordable. In terms of the powers that I would want, I would like the powers to reform the private rented sector in Greater Manchester. I would like statutory powers of regulation underpinning a good landlord charter. I think many get away with murder in terms of the failure to invest in their properties, leaving them as places that damage health, as I've said, damaging. And they also then have the situation of being able to evict people fast track. That isn't right at all. I think we need to have powers over reforming the private rented sector, greater control then over housing benefit. So only giving it to those good landlords, not allowing bad landlords to be in receipt of housing benefit. I think we need to be freed up with the finances to build homes for social rent. There has been some good work from the government, the Rough Sleepers Accommodation Programme. We're very enthusiastic about that, but it's not at the scale that will solve the problem. There are obvious things, the powers they could give us, and we could do it. Finland, if you look at Finland's figures, when they did make Housing First a national priority, they are the only country between 2010 and 2020 that saw levels of rough sleeping and homelessness coming down the other way. Nearly every other Western country, it was going up. Finland brought it down because of national political will behind the drive. It can be done. The question is, are we prepared to do it?
And your answer to that?
I don't know. I doubt it, if I'm honest. We are in Greater Manchester. I can tell you that now. If I'm standing for election at the moment, I can't speak for, if it's not me, if But if it's me re-elected, I absolutely will reaffirm the commitment to end rough sleeping. I donate 15% of my salary to the Greater Manchester Mayor's charity to support a bed every night. I will continue to do that every month if re-elected. We will continue to do everything that we're doing. We're going to bring forward our homelessness prevention strategy. Is the will there at the national level fully to get behind this? I don't know. I'm kind of thinking maybe not, but I don't know. But I think the government's got a choice. It's done some things that have worked. It's got some success stories here. It's whether they want to really turn it into a national success story, because they can do. There's no reason why we can't do a Finland.
Yeah, I think you're right. Fascinating. Thank you, Andy. Gareth, Mandy, Jeff, I can see you. I don't know whether the audience can, but if you wanted to come in and wave at me, is there anything you wanted to? They can't. So yeah, you're all on screen.
Alex, I've got
Mandy,
a few thoughts, if that's okay. Andy, thank you so much for coming along today as well. And I had read like a bit about your background and stuff, and it's so refreshing to hear, because that's just the way it is. And it's like, before Eddie Hughes, I think we should have you, Eddie Hughes, in the ABAs in a room, and we might get somewhere nationally. Do you know what I mean? It's that the Housing First model is personal centred. That is the very core of it. No time scale, no nothing, all the support for people. And it's, and don't, like that, when you said about ending homelessness, you couldn't have predicted that pandemic was going to come and change society so dramatically. You had the vision, you've got the understanding, it's just getting it out there, so I really appreciate it. And like, we could like go grilling you and saying this, that, or that, but there's nothing really, because you're singing from the same song sheet that I personally would like to see happening. Housing first, across the board, integrated service. And do you know what I mean? We know how to get it done. It's just starting to make people believe it. So thank you for your time.
Andy, have you ever worked with EBEs before, experts by experience? And do you do it in Manchester? Like, you've got a homeless board you go into afterwards? Well, would you consider a couple of EBEs, somebody from Greater Manchester, to sit on that board with you?
They're on it, Jeff. So we have, we've
Fantastic.
always, we've adopted the principle of, co-production, whatever people the buzzwords are, but always, the Homelessness Action Network is just a fantastic forum. It's just people with experience who work with, it's just people who are experts in many different ways, and I think it's the strength of our work. Mandy, I wouldn't say we've got, we're on a journey, is what I would say, and I'm not going to come on here and claim that we've got everything right, and there's more we could clearly do in terms of building homes for social rent, etc. But I think we do now know. I think Greater Manchester has kind of now understood what is needed, and it's as you said. If you've got to start. The way I keep saying it to my to my team whenever I'm kind of talking to them about this, it's simple. It's names, not numbers. That is the approach that we adopt. Names, not numbers. People, the individual. Somebody from my office who leads my office, kind of when we were finding it hard to crack, we weren't getting anywhere to begin with. And he started to go out doing the walkabout, every couple of weeks, getting the names of everybody, and then going back to the public services saying, hang on a minute, you know this person because they're in touch with you, and these people know them. So we joined the dots around these people, and we kept confronting our public services with the same names. Why has this person now not been given, because it's often not just a home that they need, it might be mental health support. And we made the public services have one conversation about each individual. And that was a massive part of our journey. And Alex, I think this is why I support the faculty so much. The health service has a bigger role here than it sometimes acknowledges itself. When I first said to the health service in Greater Manchester, I want you to help fund the bed every night, they said, well, we don't fund shelters. And I said, well, why not? I said, you fund obesity, or you fund sort of all kinds of health drives, but you're going to leave my office here and you're going to walk past people whose health is visibly suffering in front of you in the street. And you're telling me the National Health Service has no responsibility to try and accommodate those people. And eventually that argument kind of wore them down a bit. And they did. And to be fair, they do now contribute. The National Health Service in Greater Manchester does contribute. But it was a massive barrier to get through. And I think the journey here is all public services, if you can, buying into a names not numbers approach, a recovery approach, and then you can get somewhere. But thank you, Mandy. I really appreciate it.
Can I bring in
Thank you for that as well.
the other theme which we talked about last night? We had a fabulous lecture from a UCL professor of community pediatrics, actually asking us to think more upstream, almost about prevention, and to think about the routes which lead individuals, families, children into lives and into situations which perhaps end up with homelessness. And a particular call from her, it's Mandy's call very often, for more integration of services and for thinking about families in temporary accommodation, families ending up in bed and breakfast, families ending up in that real bottom end of the private rented sector. Are you doing anything to think about that how to head people off at the pass almost, or to lift people up before they end up in that homeless position?
This is a real learning point for me, Alex, having left Westminster. So there's an obsession down there, isn't there, about the benefits bill, and then, particularly all that stuff that George Osborne brought along around, shirkers and all of this kind of sort of like trying to use the benefit system to label people. And what I have witnessed now, and I didn't understand this fully a couple of years ago, is when they froze local housing allowance by being, quotes, tough on benefits, was what the narrative was at national level. All that does is it loads unfunded costs on local authorities. We then are seeing the presentations from homeless families. And if Mandy does go on about, I would say you're absolutely right, Mandy, to focus on temporary accommodation, because that is a hidden scandal, actually. Just because people aren't on the streets, it doesn't mean that children are not in really unsafe, unsuitable environments, taken away from their school and their community. And that is actually a bit of a hidden scandal, I think, largely, Alex, some of what goes on in really poor standard, just because local authorities just don't have the money to pay for it, because these are unfunded pressures that they have to pick up from caps on local housing allowance. And this is the kind of way that Westminster treats local government. And it's, I see it more clearly now than I did when I was part of that Westminster system. And I would say, if you want something serious to be done about temporary accommodation, which it should be done, you can't do it on the basis on which local authorities are currently operating with their finances. They are always the last public service to get support, and I'm afraid they're really, really struggling. And the government's going to, if it's serious, as I said before about homelessness, so I gave you that sort of doubtful answer, it has to start shoring up the financial base of our local authorities. Otherwise, we won't be able to give those homeless families the correct support that they need.
I think that's right. And we're pleased we've got several of your fabulous colleagues from Greater Manchester talking on this theme, actually in the session directly after this, about how primary care can do more to find families, to find people in need of support before they fall into the more serious end of the spectrum of homelessness.
We're trying to develop a sort of commissioning framework for temporary accommodation to kind of, it's a sort of standards-free zone at the moment, isn't it? Well, I think the local authorities try, but it's not easy at all. And what we need to do is get some clear principles about, and certainly some of the safeguarding issues within where there are kids in places where there are, potentially people who could pose a risk to them. I mean, this stuff really needs looking at, in my view, and we're trying to develop a.
That's definitely a main issue about where you put some people, because not all accommodation is suitable accommodation for certain people. Like you said, if children get put into certain hostels and there's drug users or there's, I don't know, ex-convicts or whatever who's been done for abusing children or whatever. So, I mean, they're in that environment, they're in that, and they're exposed to all of that. And it's the same as an addict off the streets. If you put an addict off the streets into a hotel or a hostel with other users, and they're going through detox or they're going through rehabilitation, that's going to cause them to relapse. So I think a big issue there is realizing that not all accommodation is suitable accommodation, and getting that across the board and making people realize that as well. I think it's important.
I think it's massively important, Gareth, and thanks for coming in on it. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying, though. If you start with a quality offer that sends a message about respect and dignity, then you're creating the conditions for that situation to succeed, because people will, feel valued, won't they? And it will be a good environment, and it will help them recover their dignity and everything else that may have been taken from them. If you put them in an environment that almost reinforces the message that no one gives one about them, well, you're creating the conditions for more and more failure, aren't you, if you do that? And this is the problem that we've got with the mentality in our country around public spending. We don't like doing the right thing in the first instance upstream, and then we spend thousands of pounds downstream as crisis services try and pick up the pieces. It makes no sense. One of the ways in which I got public buy-in in Greater Manchester to a bed every night was that I used the crisis research that showed that the cost of somebody left to sleep rough for a year is about £20,000 to public services, whereas the cost of a bed every night is £11,000, because it's about 30 something quid, the way we managed to fund it. So which one should we do? But public services still work on the failure principle, and this is why I do support universal basic income. I think we would have a stronger society in this country if we gave everybody a secure home and a secure level of income. You're giving them the conditions for success then, if you do that, and the conditions for their kids to be successful. If you have them living day to day in a poor quality private rented property where they're fearful of eviction, their mental health's just going to go down the pan, isn't it? And then you're going to create the conditions. We create the conditions for failure rather than creating the conditions for success. And, that is very much evident in the conditions of temporary accommodation, which you've just described.
And I just say as well that because of the pandemic that there's going to be so many more casualties as well. So if it's now that the government should be acting, it's all very well saying we've got numbers housed at the minute. That's not accommodation, do you know what I mean? That's not real. That's not a stable home for a person. But it needs to be now, because, like you said, the mental health issues going on now, do you know what I mean? The younger generation, their social skills and everything's been took away from them. The aftermath is going to be horrific, and the numbers will go up and up. So if there's ever a time to start putting things like you're suggesting, it's now.
I think they should do, Mandy. I mean, the government should keep the universal credit uplift indefinitely, to pick up the warning that you're rightly pointing to. They should wipe away people's rent arrears, because obviously there's a massive increase in people in rent arrears. And I think they should, because it's no fault of people, is it? The pandemic has taken their work away from them. And I think they should extend the eviction ban. And if there are examples of landlords who've really lost out unfairly, well, then they should compensate those landlords. But I think if they did those three things, universal credit, wipe away people's arrears, extend the eviction ban, immediately you've created a platform of stability so people can stop worrying about it. Whereas if you don't do those things, people worry, and the worry creates mental health, addiction issues, failure issues, and that's. My fear is we'll tip back into that cycle post-pandemic, unfortunately.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hopefully Eddie will sort it out.
Always hope.
And my fear is that we're running into people's lunch and into your next meeting, Andy, because we've taken more of your time than you had promised. But thank you very, very much for joining us this morning or this afternoon. Now, I think everyone.
I've been speaking that long, Alex.
I think everyone in our audience would have agreed with those last points you made about some practical actions the government could take now to defend people from what's coming. Because I agree that we've seen the pandemic, but we've not yet seen the real aftermath begin to come out, have we? And how that's going to unfold in the next months and years is something which certainly we worry about. But I think it's
scary.
But I think the government could take measures, as you say, to head it off at the pass and protect a lot of people from what might be coming at us. But I'm afraid I do have to bring us to a close. I've got voices in my ear saying we're timing out. We have our next session at 1:30, where, as I said, we've got GPs from Greater Manchester talking about how to tackle health inequalities. So thank you for your support to them. And we've got colleagues from Hull talking about integrated commissioning across the city of Hull. Again, some really interesting lessons learned there during COVID. But to bring this session to a close, thanks to you, Andy, for joining us. Thanks to Gareth, Jeff, and Mandy for that discussion. I'm going to call this session to a close and see you on a screen later today, and see you in Manchester one day for real, Andy, I hope. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers, Andy.